Welcome to Voodoo Whiskey Gaming, and this is my late review of Darksiders Genesis. I played it on the PS4, it's also available on the Xbox One, Switch, and PC. I could mention that it's on Google Stadia, but yeah, who cares? So let's start with the story, which you play as either Strife or War, and this all takes place before what happened in Darksiders 1, 2, and 3. Which, I guess I could have just said takes place before Darksiders 1. But who cares? This is Strife and War on a mission for the Council, specifically one to maintain the balance. This is back when the Council was a real thing, trying to maintain the balance before, the apocalypse occurred. It does one thing I don't like from prequels, and that is, it's like, hey, we're part of the same universe! And by that I mean they use characters that I don't think they should be using in this game. Specifically, I'll just say it, I'll say it's Vulgrim. You meet Vulgrim because you do it very early on, and it was just weird for me because it seemed like War and Vulgrim hadn't really met when you're playing Darksiders, the first one. So it was kind of weird to me when suddenly Vulgrim is in Darksiders Genesis, a prequel. But on top of that, they could have replaced Vulgrim since they do introduce another merchant character anyways. So it just felt kind of lazy and like they were trying way too hard to be like, hey, we remember Darksiders, guys! That being said, I actually do find the story pretty interesting, and I actually like the interactions between Strife and War. I really do like that all four of the horsemen have very different personalities, and you get to see a bit more of that in Darksiders Genesis because you get to see interactions between two of them. Let's get into the audio. I love the music. I will say that right now. I love the music. I really do overall enjoy the music from the Darksiders franchise. I think Darksiders 1 and 2 had great soundtracks, and I think Genesis has a really, really good soundtrack. As for the voiceover work, I think it's very well done. I really like that they got the same voice back for War because, let's face it, it's a great voice and it really fits the character. Or I should say the voice actor is really good and does a good job to fit the character. But I like the new voice actor that they have for Strife. I guess we haven't really heard Strife before, but I definitely think it fits and it works with the personality. As for the sound effects and so on, I think they're good in this game. I think they work well considering the style of game this is, and they fit with the world that has been built so far in the Darksiders franchise. I do have one huge complaint with one part of the audio, and it's just a very particular time. Anytime that there is an echo, it really kind of drowns out the voices, so it just gets a little frustrating. I'm gonna put a little clip in so you can hear it.
So I'm guessing it would throw a wrench in Lucifer's plans if we got to it first.
But that was really my only complaint with the audio. As for the gameplay mechanics and whatnot, this is actually something that I wasn't expecting. I knew it was going to be more of a top-down game, but it's much more of a twin-stick shooter than like a Diablo-esque game. I was definitely expecting this to control and play a lot more like Diablo, and it does not, which is actually a good thing for the most part. But like I said, it is very much a top-down twin-stick shooter. There really isn't a lock-on, which at times is a little frustrating, but it still works well enough, especially since Strife really has infinite ammo for his guns. And War is very much a melee character, so he's up close and personal. And when you are doing melee, it does have a bit of a lock-on feature. The world itself is broken up into a mission structure, and each of the missions tends to go into its own kind of world, realm, biome, whatever you want to call it. And it all takes place from a hub, which is the Void, and I do have one complaint with the Void, as I mentioned in the audio section. Otherwise, I think the Void is pretty neat, and they turned it into like a bit of a labyrinth as well. There's a labyrinth element to it so that you can find certain collectibles that can help you unlock new abilities and so on. Darksiders Genesis follows Darksiders 1 a bit in that you collect souls and you trade them, as well as you find items to upgrade your health and your wrath meter. But otherwise, you don't really level up in a traditional sense. I gotta say, I think it was a really unique way of doing it, introducing Strife for the first time in like a top-down shooter, and it kind of makes sense since he's overall a gun user, whereas everybody else is kind of melee-based in the Four Horsemen. Let's get into the controls, which the controls I'm not entirely in love with. I think they're kind of overly complicated for a twin-stick shooter, and aiming special abilities is just pure ass. It's shit, it's garbage, it's awful and it's really frustrating. As for the combat, aiming the combat and doing the combat isn't bad, but if you want to switch ammos or switch abilities or any of that stuff, it's done in a little overly complicated way and it kind of drags down the game because a twin stick shooter should be really fast paced. The way that you go about switching abilities and aiming special abilities not working just drags that pace down. Lastly, the graphics. It's really kind of hard to judge the graphics of this game because of the top-down nature. You don't get a great sense of what the characters look like. You don't see all the detail that could be in them, which is truly disappointing because while I know Joe because I can't pronounce his name, isn't the creative director anymore and his art style is the inspiration, but it's not something they have stuck to entirely. I do think the overall art style is pretty cool in these games, so having the top-down element, you don't get to appreciate that. On top of that, I feel like the cutscenes were a place that they could show that off, and then they didn't with a really lazy still image cutscenes. And the artwork isn't even that good in the cutscenes. I know often that those still images ones can be beautiful, but not in this case. Like, War's face just doesn't really look like War's face. It feels very lazy, unfortunately. The most positive thing I could say is that it's a bright and colorful game, which isn't that weird for the Darksiders franchise, but that's not a great praise when you can't really view the art style and really enjoy what it could be. So overall, while I don't necessarily hate this game, I don't necessarily love this game, I just am kind of really in between on it. It does some interesting things that I enjoy, it continues a story that I enjoy, but playing through it is not necessarily something I love because the controls just don't really work for it. I feel like the top-down element was kind of a waste. While it's kind of neat, they could have made a good third-person shooter out of this that they chose not to. I just feel like this could have been something truly awesome, and to put it simply, unless you're a really die-hard fan of the Darksiders games, you don't need to play this. So to wrap this up, I'm going to say that, hey, I recently replayed Darksiders 3, and I enjoyed it more the second time. I still think it's busted, and they really needed to do a better job explaining what it was going to be. That being said, Darksiders Genesis exists for the die-hard Darksiders fans, and even them I don't think it will fully satisfy. So I'm gonna say skip it unless you're hardcore into Darksiders. Okay, so in the comments down below, why don't you tell me, are you a hardcore fan of Darksiders? They've had a really spotty track record, it's very 50-50, and I gotta wonder, is anybody else out there hardcore into Darksiders? As always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button. And if you like what I'm doing in general, share, subscribe. Have a good one.